While a typical war documentary archives every warship ever built or every aircraft ever built, military engineering history often forgets the ground truth. NATO spent 40 years building thousands of armored vehicles for a European apocalypse. In reality, these machines fought brutal proxy wars they were never designed to survive. The M48 was conceived as a frontline bulwark against Soviet armor in Germany. It weighed 49 tons, carried a 90mm gun, and required 4 crewmen. Yet its defining legacy occurred in Vietnam, where it became an infantry support platform against guerrilla forces. It was designed to fight massed Soviet tanks. It is remembered for clearing dense Asian jungles. Britain rushed this machine to survive the final weeks of the Second World War. Entering service weighing 46 tons with a 17-pounder gun, it equipped 15 Allied nations. However, its true value was proving that mobility, armor, and firepower could exist on a single chassis. On paper, it was a heavy cruiser. In practice, it became the universal tank. West Germany engineered this platform under the assumption that missiles made heavy armor obsolete. It prioritized speed, moving its 40 tons at 65 kilometers per hour with 4 crewmen. Instead of conducting rapid European counterattacks, it spent decades waiting, only to see major combat deployments during peacekeeping missions in the former Yugoslavia. They ordered a sprinter. They got a peacekeeper. The Pentagon envisioned a cheap, lightweight battle taxi to safely transport rifle squads across irradiated battlefields. Built from aluminum, weighing 12 tons and carrying 11 infantrymen, over 80,000 units were eventually manufactured. While commanders praised its mechanical reliability, soldiers quickly learned its thin hull could not stop heavy machine gun fire. History remembered a logistical triumph. The crews remembered sandbags stacked on the floorboards to survive hidden landmines. France designed this airborne vehicle to be deployed immediately after a nuclear exchange. Featuring an oscillating turret, it weighed just 14 tons and required only 3 operators. Despite seeing extensive combat from the Suez Crisis to the Indo-Pakistani Wars, its greatest contribution was proving the mechanical viability of tank autoloaders. France wanted a paratrooper tank. The war had other plans. Washington and Bonn attempted to jointly engineer the ultimate fighting vehicle to dominate the 1970s. Projected to cost $1 million each, it featured a 152mm gun and hydrop pneumatic suspension. However, severe metric conversion issues and catastrophic budget overruns destroyed the entire initiative before production began. 14 built, 0 lost. The math tells the rest. London prioritized absolute lethality over mobility when conceiving this 55-ton behemoth. Armed with a devastating 120mm rifled gun, it was operated by 4 crew members. While it suffered from notoriously unreliable engines throughout its career, its mere existence forced Soviet designers to drastically upgrade their frontal armor. The chieftain solved firepower. It created mechanical nightmares. Bonn demanded an armored transport that allowed infantry to fight from within the vehicle. Weighing 28 tons and equipped with a 20mm cannon, it carried a squad of 10. Nevertheless, its heavy armor and offensive capabilities blurred the line between personnel carrier and light tank, completely rewriting global mechanized doctrine. The infantry rode safely inside. The tactics changed forever. The British Army sought a stealthy reconnaissance asset capable of outmaneuvering Soviet patrols. Clocking in at 8 tons and reaching 80 kilometers per hour, its 3 operators relied entirely on speed for survival. Yet when the Cold War ended, it was replaced by heavier wheeled platforms offering far superior landmine protection. It evaded the Soviets. It lost to explosives. The Pentagon spent 14 years developing this 27-ton infantry carrier. Armed with a 25mm chain gun and Tau missiles, it cost over $3 million per unit. However, during Operation Desert Storm in 1991, its thermal optics proved so devastating it destroyed more Iraqi armor than actual battle tanks. They ordered a taxi. They got an assassin. French strategists believed nuclear weapons rendered heavy armor obsolete, leading them to prioritize absolute mobility. Weighing 36 tons and operated by 4 men, it carried a 105mm gun. Instead of fighting Soviet divisions across a radioactive European plain, its first major combat test occurred against Iraqi forces during the Gulf War. France wanted a sprinter. The desert demanded a brawler. The British Army procured this tracked box to protect advancing infantry from chemical fallout. Moving its 15 tons at 52 kilometers per hour, it transported 10 soldiers behind 13 millimeters of steel. While it became the logistical backbone of the military, the troops locked inside endured deafening engine noise and brutal internal temperatures. It was designed to save lives. It is remembered for testing endurance. Sweden engineered this turretless machine specifically to ambush invaders and retreat across dense forests. Weighing 40 tons with 3 crew members, its 105mm gun was fixed directly to the hull. Because aiming required moving the entire chassis, firing on the move was an absolute physical impossibility. It was designed as an impenetrable defensive fortress. It is remembered as a static target. Rome attempted to modernize aging American transports by bolting sloped aluminum armor onto the hull. Weighing 12 tons and armed with a .50 caliber machine gun, it carried a squad of 7 infantrymen. However, its cramped interior and minimal firepower ensured it remained a stopgap measure rather than a true frontline combatant. 800 built. 0 major wars fought. The math tells the rest. West Germany developed this 55-ton behemoth to correct the glaring armor deficiencies of its predecessor. Operated by 4 crew members, it introduced a devastating 120mm smoothbore gun to the battlefield. Despite its Cold War origins, it rapidly became the undisputed standard export tank for over 20 modern nations. They ordered a Defender. They got an international standard. The Pentagon gambled on untested technology by installing an aviation gas turbine engine inside a ground vehicle. The original 60-ton variant housed a 105mm gun and utilized classified composite armor. On paper, its catastrophic fuel consumption should have caused a logistical collapse. In practice, its sheer speed and silent operation allowed it to obliterate enemy armor before being detected. Bonn requested an amphibious scout vehicle capable of driving backwards as rapidly as it moved forwards. Weighing 19 tons and carrying a 20mm cannon, it required 2 dedicated drivers facing opposite directions. Yet the rapid advancement of thermal optics and unmanned drones eventually made this highly complex, mechanical marvel completely obsolete. The Luchs solved mobility. It created engineering nightmares. London fielded this 25-ton personnel carrier to match the heavy mechanization of the Warsaw Pact. Transporting 7 soldiers and armed with a 30mm cannon, it saw extensive deployment across Middle Eastern deserts. Nevertheless, the global proliferation of cheap anti-tank guided missiles proved that even heavily upgraded armor could not guarantee crew survival. The United Kingdom wanted a fortress. The enemy had other plans. French designers merged the firepower of a medium tank with the strategic mobility of a wheeled chassis. This 15-ton, 6-wheeled vehicle featured a massive 105mm gun. While officially classified as a reconnaissance asset, it was frequently utilized as a dedicated tank destroyer during fast-paced expeditionary interventions across Africa. On paper, it gathered intelligence. In practice, it hunted armor. Paris required an air-transportable fire support platform for its ongoing colonial conflicts. Tipping the scales at merely 5 tons, this 4-wheeled scout car somehow accommodated a low-pressure 90mm gun. Despite its incredibly fragile armor, its agility allowed it to successfully ambush and destroy heavily armored battle tanks from the Falkland Islands to the Middle East. History remembered a scout car. The crews remembered a giant killer. The U.S. Army fielded this self-propelled gun to provide mobile fire support. Weighing 27 tons with a 155mm howitzer, it required 6 men. It was intended to shoot and scoot before Soviet counter-battery fire arrived. It was designed to fight a mechanized war. It is remembered for pounding static insurgent positions in the Middle East. The Marine Corps demanded an amphibious tractor to storm hostile beaches. Capable of carrying 21 infantrymen, this 29-ton aluminum box crawled through water at 13 kilometers per hour. While it successfully spearheaded coastal landings, it spent its career operating as an oversized inland patrol vehicle. They ordered a beach lander. They got an urban taxi. Washington wanted an air-droppable reconnaissance tank capable of firing anti-armor missiles from a 152mm gun. Transporting 4 men inside a 15-ton aluminum hull, the violent recoil often damaged its own delicate electronics. Its complex missile system proved disastrously unreliable in the jungles of Vietnam. On paper, it was a technological marvel. In practice, it was a maintenance nightmare. West Germany engineered this 6-wheeled transport to move infantry squads through contaminated radiological zones. Tipping the scales at 17 tons, it moved across rough terrain at 100 kilometers per hour. During the Gulf War, Allied forces relied heavily on its advanced atmospheric sensors rather than its troop-carrying capacity. The Fuchs solved environmental reconnaissance. It created a reliance on specialized detection units. Paris sought a versatile wheeled platform to quickly deploy infantry across vast African colonies and European plains. Weighing 13 tons and carrying 10 soldiers, it featured modular configurations ranging from ambulances to missile launchers. Over 5,000 units were manufactured, making it a staple of modern war documentary footage. Cheap to produce, impossible to replace. The Netherlands adopted this modified American design after it failed to win Pentagon contracts. Upgraded with spaced aluminum armor and a 25mm cannon, this 13-ton vehicle carried 7 infantrymen into combat. It served admirably during European peacekeeping deployments. Yet its thin base armor struggled against modern explosive devices. The Dutch wanted a budget fortress. The explosives had other plans. The Marine Corps adopted this 8-wheeled Canadian design to increase the strategic mobility of its light infantry battalions. Armed with a 25mm chain gun, the 13-ton vehicle reached speeds of 100 kilometers per hour. It forced military engineering history to acknowledge that wheels could sometimes outperform tracks. History remembered a rapid deployment success. The crews remembered agonizingly cramped troop compartments. Britain built this exceptionally lightweight tracked vehicle to navigate the soft, boggy terrain of northern Europe. Tipping the scales at barely 8 tons, its 3-man crew operated a low-velocity 76mm gun. Instead of hunting Soviet scouts, it famously sprinted across the frozen bogs of the Falkland Islands, outmaneuvering heavier Argentinian defenders. Over 3,000 built, none lost in the South Atlantic. The math tells the rest. The M60 rushed into production to counter new Soviet armor. Operated by 4 men, this 50-ton tank utilized a 105mm gun. It stood as NATO's primary bulwark for 3 decades, yet it saw its most brutal combat under Israeli command in the Sinai Desert. It was designed to defend Germany. It is remembered for crossing the Suez Canal. Italy spent over 2 decades developing a domestic infantry fighting vehicle to replace its aging fleet. Finally entering service at 23 tons, it featured a 25mm cannon and carried 6 infantrymen. By the time it was fully operational, its armor and armament specifications were already considered outdated by international standards. On paper, it was a modernization leap. In practice, it was born obsolete. London developed this heavily armored howitzer to deliver overwhelming firepower against advancing Warsaw Pact columns. Weighing 45 tons, its 5-man crew fired a 155mm shell up to 30 kilometers. However, the end of the Cold War meant the massive artillery barrages it prepared for never materialized. The AS-90 solved the range deficit. It created a deployment problem. The Pentagon mounted a 20mm rotary cannon onto a 12-ton armored chassis to protect forward units from Soviet attack helicopters. Firing 3,000 rounds per minute, the 4-man crew relied entirely on short-range radar. However, in Vietnam and the Middle East, it was almost exclusively used to devastate ground-based infantry ambushes. They ordered an aircraft hunter. They got an infantry shredder. The British Army designed this ultra-compact tracked vehicle to transport specialized anti-aircraft and engineering teams. Weighing only 8 tons, its aluminum armor provided minimal protection while reaching 80 kilometers per hour. Inside, the 4 passengers experienced a violently turbulent ride, squeezed alongside their equipment in absolute darkness. Fast transport, claustrophobic reality. West Germany and France collaborated to mount this advanced radar-guided missile system onto a 32-ton tracked chassis. Operated by 3 men, it was meant to swat low-flying Warsaw Pact jets from the sky. However, the sheer expense of the system limited procurement, leaving many frontline units vulnerable. Bonn wanted an impenetrable air shield. The defense budget had other plans. Every combat vehicle ever built eventually breaks down or takes fire. This 50-ton recovery platform used a massive crane and a 4-man crew to drag disabled tanks off the battlefield. While unglamorous, no armored offensive could sustain momentum without these heavy tow trucks working under enemy fire. It was designed to fix broken engines. It is remembered for rescuing stranded crews.